Simone. Today we are going to be talking about grooming gangs because while this is not new news, or it should not be new news because it's been going on for quite a while, there have been extensive networks of grooming gangs of Pakistani immigrants within the UK, where they would take young girls and what's the word here? Essay them. You know, it's basically like
She's snatching your people up, trying to rape them, so y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they raping everybody out here.
Yeah, well, no, basically what had happened was starting in the early-ish 2010s, this became a more pervasive practice. Basically, an industry arose when selling hard drugs became a little bit too criminally dangerous. So what instead started to happen was the flourishing and growth of the purchase and sale of sexual services, but in a very not good way, in that these communities, and this is one of those things where, okay, crimes tend to, I've noticed, in terms of crimes that have been committed against us, they tend to meme their way through often cultural or ethnic communities. Like,
yeah.
Just I think like careers do too, like suddenly, everyone's a doctor and like,
Well,
there's
I
a
mean,
whole lot of
you had a huge reason for it to meme its way through this community because the police weren't doing anything about it. And
yes,
so if
well, but anyway, like I would just point out that like there are lots of weird, like kind of esoteric crimes that do tend to be culturally siloed, not just because you're Pakistani or whatever, could be because you're Italian or because you're Irish or because you're
I'm
Catholic or
sorry,
because-
Simone, I have literally, and I mean this literally, I have never heard of widespread grape gangs that were not this one particular.
I'm referring to like completely random different types of crimes. Like, remember in the travel agency
but the point
world,
I'm making is that it counters the point you're making. Okay,
Mhm.
I understand, you're right. It is true that sometimes a crime idea will meme its way through one particular ethnic, religious, or cultural community.
Mhm.
And you are attempting to say that is how this particular practice spread within this community. The counterpoint I am making is I had literally not heard of widespread grape gangs outside of this one particular community ever, and yet I find it within the countries where this religion is practiced frequently, and I find it within the communities that immigrate from
Well,
those
and that's
countries.
because it correlates with a cultural dehumanization of women.
Okay, yeah, but I'm just pointing out here, it's not like an accident that there was a correlation.
It's not an accident, and I think there's an interesting discussion to be had there. But at any rate, this became sort of a meme within this community when other sorts of crime and money making amongst, we'll say, free radicals, like sort of young men especially, but also like little like married men with jobs in the community were getting involved in this, started doing this. And what would happen is you'd get like the sourcing happened with young men often like starting to date women who were sometimes like middle class, normal like women in the UK, but more often like lower class, down and out, like struggling young women. And they would love bomb them, give them tons of attention. They'd be
Young
like, oh,
underage
hey,
women.
underage women. And then be like, oh, by the way, you could start making some money if you sleep with this older attractive guy. But then then this like slippery slope of like,
So you know what they, yeah, and we'll get into how they did it, but like just to understand the scope of this. So it's estimated that around 1,400 children were sexually exploited in this way
This
in
is
just
insane.
Rotterdam between
Yeah.
1997 and 2013. To understand how little the police responded to this, the only persecutions were 5 men in Rotterdam in 2010, 11 men in Derbyshire in 2010. Between 2008 and 2010, there were 3 men convicted in Cornwall. In 2012, 9 men from Rothschild and Alderham, and 2013, 7 men from Oxford. And that's it.
And there were literal cases of, for example, caseworkers entering homes and seeing girls beneath men in their bedrooms. And they just walked out of the room. Like, well, nothing to see here.
Well,
I'm reporting this.
They also participated in the weddings and everything like that. So if I'm going to go over a few individual instances here, one victim known as Sarah was kidnapped at the age of 15, forced to learn the Quran. She was forced to, another victim was forced into Islamic dress and only permitted to speak Urdu. Another victim was forced into 3 Sharia marriages during her 12 years in captivity. This was someone who was captured at 15. Because some of these people were just kidnapped. In Bradford, a 14-year-old girl known as Anna was quote unquote married in a traditional Islamic wedding that was attended by a social worker.
Ah,
A 14-year-old. So this is the thing that's really scandalous about this. It's
mm,
that social workers and the police were aware this was happening and were doing nothing because they did not like when we talk about the way that the urban monoculture dehumanizes people of some ethnicities and treats people of other ethnicities that have being more worthy of human dignity, like it is genuinely a very, very racist culture in the most traditional meaning of the word.
I will add to that though. Yes, and it is also classist. And I know that there were some middle class young women who got caught up in this, but a lot of what was also going on was like, oh, this like trashy girl sleeping around with guys. Like, I don't know, ignore like what are we supposed to do if she's if she's consenting to this? Like she's just a trashy woman selling her body, getting into drugs and alcohol. That's why like a lot of these girls, terrible things are happening to them. They're showing up at police stations saying, help me. And they're like, sober up and come back to us later with an adult. And then they go back out and get, assaulted again. It's just like, I think there is a classist angle to this where people
this is genuinely like what it was like in the South during the period where, if you were a white guy, you could just go out and grape black women and no one would care. Like the black woman would go to the police and they'd be like, ha ha ha, that's the way things work now. And there was a manga that came out recently in Japan that is making fun of this, which is like the UN has ordered people from sub-Saharan Africa to like immigrate to Japan to replace them. And it starts with his mom being raped and the police station being like, oh, this is actually very common. We can't prosecute this, but they said what the people said in this case, which is, well, I mean, her testimony isn't really reliable because it's a person of the underclass ethnicity testifying against somebody of the overclass ethnicity. And I think the Rotherham case shows without any shadow of a doubt that there is this genuine belief among this class of social workers and police that there is a deserving underclass ethnicity and a deserving superior ethnicity, and they do need to be treated differently, and crimes should at scale be covered up. Like, I think for people who are like, oh no, progressives aren't like that, or like this isn't like a mainstream thing in our culture, you can point to this, and if they're like, well, they're not still like that, okay, well, now that all of this has become like super public information, and progressives will say this is public information, we'll go into evidence that it was not, on January 8th, 2025, so recently, the UK Parliament voted on a Conservative Party amendment to the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which called for a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. Now, I would note here that a YouGov poll commissioned on this shows that 76% of people in the UK support this bill. Do you know how the votes broke down? 364 against the amendment, only 111 for the amendment.
Oh my Lord. Okay. That's embarrassing for them.
No, but the point being, like, if you live in the UK, I can just imagine, like, almost everyone thinks
The
this
fury.
is something that needs to be.
Yeah.
Our listeners who are like from Pakistan are like emailing us and being like, bro, like in Pakistan, this would be prosecuted. Like, this is insane.
Well, I actually want to hear your argument on this, because I think that part of what's going on and part of why people who should have been speaking up about this were not kind of could be your own arguments could be misused as justification for their actions. So hear me out on this. You have argued that, we should live in a pluralistic world where everyone's allowed to practice their own culture. And, what happens in your house with your culture is up to you. If you want to beat your kids, beat your kids, and so what I think was happening with these social workers was a version of this gone terribly wrong. Listen, lady, your daughter has chosen to join this Pakistani man's culture. And yeah, she's married. And yeah, she's pregnant now. And yeah, you say that he beats her, but like that's their culture.
And it is their culture. So I would agree with that. But they're one underage and they are two from a different culture and three non-consenting. And I think that this is the
I mean, that's where like so many of these girls, of course, were afraid for their lives, right? Like some of these girls even were, for example, prosecuted for pimping because they were helping to source other young women for the men who were clearly threatening them.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, no, I
and
love that you can prosecute the young white girl for pimping, not the
yeah,
Pakistani guy.
no, but my point is that these girls were saying, I am doing this with consent. I am getting married with consent, because there's, they're very afraid of what will happen if they don't play along, right? At that point, they're in
Well,
so deep, they've been lied
here's what
to,
I'd
and
argue is that when you have a culture, like one, you like just people should be aware this is something that Muslim cultures do at a much higher frequency than other cultures.
yeah,
And it's specifically a problem within Pakistani culture. And that means that extra attention should be paid to these groups when they're in the UK. Like, keep in mind, the UK isn't like the US, for example, right? Like,
mhm.
the UK is like actually the origin point of the British people, right? Like, they have a right to say other people shouldn't be coming into their country.
Yeah,
Other people shouldn't be, like that
right.
makes
So
sense.
if are you trying to argue then that like a culture can be like, y'all can't come in because you're not part of my culture, that's
Yes,
within their
you're
right?
practicing, and this
Within
is why you're
within the
like,
walls of my city, you're not allowed to practice your culture. You're cool with that. And if
yes,
the girls were 18 years old in a pluralistic society, would you be like, all right?
yeah, if they chose it, yeah, they're 18. Look, I'm sorry, but there's a certain point where you have to say, like, otherwise, what do you end up? You end up banning interracial marriages, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. I'm just pointing out that your argument is in alignment with the justification provided by many of the policemen and caseworkers who allowed these things to happen.
right, but I think that you and I know that that's not what they really meant.
I
I
think it's one of the things that they really meant. I do. And I also think that a lot of it is also classist, in that they were like, yeah, these slutty, uneducated girls are just going off and doing this, and it's trashy and they're gross. And, you know,
and
th-
for more context on what's happening here, because we got more information here. So
yeah.
there was a guy who was arrested in Rotherham by officers of the South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from a great den, and he was arrested twice in the same night.
Because
And
clearly he's trying to rescue his daughter. Can you imagine?
right, and now it's so Simone, I know you say what you're saying, but like it's clear that that's not what was happening. This is much closer to apartheid, not apartheid. What am I looking at? It like antebellum South under the what were those laws called? The laws that were racist against black people in the South, the Jim Crow laws.
Oh, okay.
Under the Jim Crow laws, where it is not the same for a white man to commit a crime against a black woman as it is for a black man to do the same thing to a white woman. Like if a black man did this to a white woman during that period, they'd just be immediately lynched. If a poor white guy had done this to Pakistani women,
Well, and we know that's the
immediately.
case because we know of other cases in the UK, totally divorced from, well, mostly totally divorced from this issue, where, for example, academic research has been suppressed because the findings of the research
Yes. So
didn't
the
look great.
for people who don't know this, the reason why it's so hard to access the genetic data banks in the UK is because somebody was doing research and they just decided to look at the rates of children who are born from a father having relations with their daughter, because it's easy to tell from like genetic code. And it turned out it happened within one population at 30,000 times the rate of any other population. And they were like, oh, this is super racist. It's not racist, it's a fact.
It's a
Like,
problem.
it's a problem. Like, what
This is
about
really
those
bad.
girls? Like, why is
Yeah.
that? So you know why all this came to light was Elon Musk accused the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, of being deeply complicit in this. And of course, now he's like, no, 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 I wasn't complicit. But like, why is he not allowing for this to be investigated? Why is his party?
Yeah, the argument that has been made by people in the UK is, if he were innocent in this, especially because he's newly elected, the typical obvious response of a newly elected politician when there's some kind of scandal is absolutely put an inquiry on. Like, I wasn't here. Oh, these darn previous politicians have screwed everything up. Thank goodness I've been elected to office. So it is suspicious that he's not full steam ahead on this, it does imply he has something to hide.
Well, yeah, and I can understand in an instance like this, and I think that people don't get it. When a society reaches a point like
Mhm.
this, where there is no face that the electoral system really cares about the public. You mind 76% of people want this investigated, right?
Yeah.
This is where you get figures like Luigi Mangione coming up. who-
Yeah. No, true. Yeah.
Because
You're just gonna have to start killing people.
when it doesn't look like there's any other realistic solution.
When I hear about some of the things that were done to these underage girls.
If it was my kid, like very seriously, and I think that this is the thing about, people are like, oh, Malcolm, you're so, saying people in the UK are being so timid. I would be a danger, a danger to these politicians, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you get pushed to a point where you're going to have if people had done any of these things listed to our children, both you and I would break the law to enact justice. I don't care. Like and because you know me, like I find the idea of committing acts of violence distasteful. Like I just don't like it because it's messy. I don't like human bodies. I think it's gross. I would have absolutely no problem here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're talking torture. Like there are times when I think it's appropriate to torture other people. I'm like very willing to state this publicly and openly. That which they have done to their victims.
Or
There's actually this. I don't. You have not read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. The way that she enacts justice, I think, is wonderful. Lisbeth Salander. The autistic, my autistic hero.
By the way, so the way that they covered this up,
the
way that the police dismissed it is they just called all of the victims unreliable.
Yeah, because
I love it.
Again, I think that's very classist. I think it's super classist. It's like, oh, they're writing them off as slutty, uneducated, poor girls.
Of why progressives ignore that class is like the main thing that matters, where they're like, oh, like ethnic differences matter, oh, like neuro differences matter, oh, gender differences matter, and you're like, actually, it's mostly just class. And they're like, no. And the core answer we'll get to in that episode is that what the problem is that within progressive culture, the loudest voices are intrinsically the highest class voices. And so it cannot be admitted in terms of who you are hearing from within progressive culture that everything is downstream of class, or the people with systemic power within that culture would lose their power or be delegitimized. And so they can't say, oh, us PhD student at Harvard is actually very privileged because I am a queer, trans woman, right? I get to say it sort of like delegitimizes the entire power structure there, because the power structure is so tied to the existing oligarchical structure of our society and the existing elitist pools within society there. And so they're very comfortable dehumanizing anyone who is both low class and of one of the ethnic groups that they, don't see as human. But I want to address here a claim that's been made repeatedly that, oh, actually, everyone always knew about this. Actually, the New York Times covered this. Actually, this wasn't covered up by the media.
Oh, yeah, this is something people have started to say. Yeah.
Well, there was a great investigation into this by Matt Goodwin, who did a series of tweet on it.
Okay.
And so first he goes over how he did the research, and the gist being is he goes into the articles using the specific wording that people criticized him for not using before. They're like, okay, you got to use this wording because this is the way they were talking about it. So he goes, let's look at the years 2011 to 2025, because before 2011, there was not a single mention in this in the UK media, despite there being evidence of this and people talking about this going back decades, specifically the BNP and the EDL. But in 2011 comes a big year where like they lose any excuse for not talking about this anymore, because in 2011, Andrew Norfolk of the Times started to write the first early pieces, despite hard evidence that while he was writing these pieces, he was being abused and harassed for doing it. So let's look at all UK newspapers during this more than a decade long period, 2011 to 2025, 4,659 articles. Okay.
Okay.
So this is all the grooming gangs, everything like that. So under 5,000. Okay. So anti-Muslim, 17,000 articles.
Okay.
Post Office or Horizon, 20,000 articles. Extreme Right, 21,000 articles. Islamophobia, 23,000 articles. Exposes Scandal, 25,000 articles. Stephen Lawrence, 29.8 thousand articles. Anti-Racism, 34,000 articles. Windrush, 35.5 thousand articles. You want to hear something ridiculous? George Floyd, 38.8 thousand articles when they have this is one guy and they've got active and well-known great gangs going on in their country. Black Lives Matter, 59,000 articles. Grenfell, 71,000. Net Zero, 141,000. And racism, 382,000. They're very obsessed with racism, very unconcerned with great gangs. The numbers speak for themselves relative to other scandals, and among a strong liberal bias in parts of the media class, the mass rape of young working class white girls and women just wasn't a priority. But even there, 440 articles built around grooming gang between 2011 to 2025 is dwarfed by the 2,860 articles on Islamophobia, the 3,200 articles. So keep in mind, this is compared to 440 articles, getting 3,000 articles on Stephen. 2,600 on George Floyd, 5,500 on Black Lives Matter. And they did this with the New York Times as well, because some people were like, oh, the New York Times covered this, and the New York Times covered this like 3 times. And then another case I hadn't even heard of, some like random death thing that they claimed was like unjust. It was like 3,000 times or something, or like 500 times. So it's just obvious. If you look at 2011 to 2025, The Guardian had 113 articles on this phenomenon compared to 3,300 on Islamophobia. What about the BBC? You had 357 mentions. So this is between BBC News and BBC Radio, compared to 7,500 mentions of George Floyd, 7.4 thousand of Stephen Lawrence. And it's just,
Yeah, so this wasn't really discussed. And I mean, we're lucky, I think, that Elon Musk has just decided around New Year's to make this a big deal, to try to hold people accountable. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that someone just incredibly wealthy and powerful can just kind of decide at some point, like single-handedly, I'm not okay with this. I've read the court documents. I'm going to make a big fuss about this. And
well,
like
this is
actually
all
things
Elon
get
Musk.
discussed.
Like Elon Musk is the reason why anyone is paying attention to this now.
Yeah.
He's the reason why anyone is taking this current, huge bout of trans research we're seeing, showing that it's like just a net negative now. Most people grow out of it. More than 9 out of 10 people grow out of it. Like this whole thing we know now is just a LARP at this point, and the number of children who were harmed across both of these systems that Elon has brought attention to, and I hope he continues to. Like, it's like you got one sane guy who just happens to have a lot of power. Why isn't Mark Zuckerberg doing stuff like this? Why isn't Bill Gates doing stuff like this? They could if they wanted to. Like, the only other person who seems to be showing intellectual integrity is J.K. Rowling. Let's see her jump on grooming gangs. I can see she might. I went to check in post if she had, and of course she has. In a post that has gotten over 4.5 million views, J.K. Rowling tweeted, "The details emerging about what the great gangs, why call them grooming gangs? It's like calling those who stab people to death knife owners, did to the girls in Rotherham is downright horrific. The allegations of possible police corruption in some cases are almost beyond belief." And she is referencing an article here that says, according to the victim who believed she was quote unquote in a relationship with Basharat Hussain when she was 15, the brothers had influence over some of the officers of South Yorkshire Police. She told Sheffield Crown Court, Bass said he used to pay this person in CID, and this person would say, "What's going to happen with me?" And he'd also tell him when he was going to get busted, end quote. These claims are now being investigated, but in at least one case in the early 2000s, a victim's abuser seemed to be aware she was at a state police station waiting to make a complaint against him. Like, we need to seriously break through this racist cabal that controls our universities and society right now. It's racist, it's sexist, and it victimizes anyone it think can't protect themselves.
What do you think is going to be done in the end? I mean,
Yes, I mean, we saw they tried to do an investigation and they shut it down. They shut it down because the ways that voting is done in the UK supports like normiedom, and even the conservatives we know in the UKs are like they do not like. It's not that no good conservatives exist in the UK. They do exist.
yeah.
They're just extremely small in number and they don't have political power.
Well, one argument that's being made as well is that many MPs simply have such large constituencies of Pakistani communities that they can't really afford to look critical in this case. So many are just like, sorry guys, but I can't participate in this and get reelected.
I
So
mean, I
there's
think you need people calling for major reform in the way the UK works, major deportations, major, like with a lot of this stuff, what we need to understand is that it does not make sense to treat first immigration immigrants the way you treat existing citizens within a country, especially if that country isn't a country of immigrants like the United States. Like, okay, you're a first generation immigrant, first offense, you're deported. That makes
well,
sense.
but the problem is these people aren't even getting slaps on the wrist. What first offense?
Well, no,
I
well,
mean,
that's
even
the
if
thing.
that
I think
rule were in place, you know, I mean, we need to be a lot more strict about things. But I don't know. I mean, it seems that.
But here's the thing: like, we caught them with their hand in the cookie jar. We caught them with everyone knew thousands of children had been basically sold into prostitution.
Well, to that point, by the way, I think there's another theme here that's important to discuss, which is people are like, well, I don't know how I could ever be a Nazi. Like, if I were in Nazi Germany, I would know, like, I was the baddie and I would get out of there and I would find Hitler and stop him. But
Yeah.
what's happening now? I mean, okay, people aren't being incinerated in mass, but you have large numbers of underage children being brutalized and having their lives ruined and being tortured. And
Well, I think in the US, when people are like, oh, no, I would like in the US, progressives aren't like this. And I was like, look at the US people on campuses that glorify the October 7th attacks in Israel, where they actively acted as these people are heroes. Mainstream brands post things as if everyone knows that they're doing this stuff and they just don't care. They just do not care if it is somebody of one of the approved ethnicities doing it to someone of the disapproved of the lower ethnicities. And even people, and this is the thing, even people of the approved ethnicities that are like, oh my God, like this needs to stop. Like they're not like, they don't love what you guys are doing. And I think that this is the thing is people are like, oh, Pakistanis won't like that Pakistanis get arrested and removed from the country. No, they would love that because then the people in the UK have no reason to think when they meet a random Pakistani, oh, they're probably involved in grape gangs because they're like, oh, this gets punished and this isn't something that's allowed to happen. But no, like everybody wants this except for the elite, urban monoculture, really, the ones who are in office and controlling these various countries and the oligarchs who don't want people paying attention to this because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect their daughters. It doesn't affect their communities.
it could.
Well, it could if we get some more Luigi Mangionis up in here. I'm just saying that the longer, like if the longer that people support and cover up for institutionally unfair systems, the longer, I mean, why do we like know and like not care that no investigation has happened into the people who we know are at Epstein's Island? Why do we know and not care that like the P. Diddy thing can come out and we know no one's being arrested for that other than P. Diddy, none of the other celebrities that were at these parties? Like, it's not even like a thing in the back of my mind that they might be. That we just know that, oh, okay, either you're wealthy or if you're of certain ethnic groups, and then you just don't, you get punishment for crimes.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, terrible things like this have been happening as long as humans have been around. I mean, even bonobos do terrible things like this to each other. This is
Yeah, but typically you don't allow outsiders to come and do it to people of your group.
yeah, normally, yeah, there are mechanisms for fighting back. And I guess the fact that we have a society here where the mechanisms for defending your own from this are being systematically broken is the sign of a culture that has a very limited shelf life. You're not long for this world if you cannot defend your daughters from this. Like your culture, this is an already dead culture. Maybe that's the biggest sign here of like
Well,
what
no,
what
I
does
mean,
this
that's
mean?
what I've always said the UK is. The UK is already dead. And some of our fans are like, no, like we can fight back, then do it. Like fix it. Because I don't see a realistic solution to save anything in the UK right now. And both of us have lived significant periods of our lives in the UK. I lived there for 4 years.
I love the
getting my undergrad.
UK. Yeah. Wait, this is like our second episode recently. We were like, oh crap, no, not the UK. What was the first one?
What is so effed? Yeah, I got my undergrad at St. Andrews. You got your graduate degree at Cambridge. Like clearly, we're not like anti-UK. We got married in the UK, but I don't see how they pull themselves out of it without a massive revolution in the country.
Yeah, it's called for. But I mean, this again also is not just an issue in the UK. On this very issue, Ayaan Hirsi Ali was talking about this problem and how she covered it in her book Prey, which came out in 2021, well before this was ever an issue. And she when she was in Europe before she came to the United States, she lived in the Netherlands. You know, she wasn't even in the UK. And this was something she was seeing throughout Europe as being a major problem. And there were, and we've heard rumblings of this. Remember like the mass rape issue or incident in Germany, for example. And at that point, Angela Merkel was like, yeah, multiculturalism has failed, but nothing is happening. And
Yeah.
that's, I guess, also what worries me is that people might pat themselves on the back and be like, we've identified the problem, you know, it's Rotherham. And now we're like, I'm glad we figured that out. We better keep an eye out, you know, keep your girls inside if you live over there. But that's not, no, it's not just these parts of the UK.
I think the problem is being realistic that certain immigrant groups need to be treated with a more discerning eye than other immigrant groups. And we're just not doing that.
Yeah, and I think also keeping a really close eye on your kids and who they hang out with. I know other prenatalist families that we really admire are absolutely all for having their kids having friends, but they also make their houses homes where all the kids want to hang out. They entertain, they have really cool spaces. And when your kid has friends, you watch those friends like a hawk and you know exactly what your kids are up to. And I think that that's maybe something people need to be more mindful. So we've talked in other episodes about how important it is that parents are and siblings are deeply involved in their children's dating, that they help to source partners, that they help to vet partners, that they share opinions, that they get involved. But I think that this is also an indication that parents need to be way more hands-on when it comes to their kids.
I mean, I wouldn't even say that's it.
And
I think it's important to understand that when we talk about this concept of society splitting into various groups, in one group being basically the God, what are they called in Fallout? Raiders?
okay.
Basically the Raiders, which is a group that is survived fertility collapse because they were too stupid to use contraception, or they just did force insemination, basically, women who were not consenting. These groups already exist and they already behave animal-like, and they're already incredibly dangerous to be alongside, and they exist in most major populated centers today, and your kids need to know about them if you're in those areas, which is why it is so dangerous to raise kids in large cities or in the outskirts of large cities.
Yeah, and I think maybe parents don't realize how blasé their own children can be. I actually remember when I when I was 13 years old and my parents let me stay for a month in Mexico in a hostel, a mixed gender hostel in a good town. Like it was a good area. It was like, you know, pretty safe, but also I was the only minor there. And you know, it was a pretty ballsy move on their part. And I had this argument with a college student studying biology who's also working at this ecological center that I was volunteering at for that month. who got really mad at me about safety. Because I was like, I want to go out and do this. And like, I want to go take the bus to the grocery store or something like that. And she's like, you can't go out by yourself. Like, you could get raped. You could get, like, it's dangerous out there. And I'm like, no, it's not. The vast majority of people are good. Like, the world is safe. And she's like, no, you could get really, really hurt. And
Yeah.
I just was of the very vehement opinion that I was safe wherever I could go. And here I am, like, I'm a 13-year-old girl in Mexico, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go out and like, and I mean, thank goodness nothing bad ever happened to me when I was a kid. But
well, yeah, I hitchhiked through South America when I was like, I want to say 14 or young.
Yeah, like we blithely thought that the world was a safe place and that people were good. And here's the thing: is the vast majority of the time, this is why we're alive. If it were like 90% of the time, if a 13-year-old girl stayed in a hostel by herself in Mexico and
no, but here's what you're missing, and this is actually really important.
Okay.
It is 90% of the time in some of these countries.
Bad thing happens.
So there is a famous example of
the girl who,
the girl who's like, I'm gonna hitchhike through the world and I'm gonna show that all people are like the same, and so I'm gonna go from Europe. So she goes from like Northern Europe, hits the border of a Muslim country. Literally within 10 miles of the border, her body was later found raped to death and mutilated. She didn't even get 10 miles from the border attempting this. Like, people are different, cultures are different.
It's true. And I guess the larger point that I'm making, though, I had that same sort of blithe opinion, is that we need to unfortunately dispel people of this impression that like everyone's mostly nice and like all cultures are nice, and like and I don't know how to reconcile this, because I mean, you and I believe vehemently in the importance of different cultural
No, I believe that these cultures will destroy themselves. I don't believe all cultures are equal. I don't believe that a culture where people will murder someone because they think that they've stolen somebody else's penis, see our penis stealing episode, that's a good cultural practice. I don't believe that a culture where people sterilize their children because they think that they're a different gender than the gender they were born is a good culture. There's all sorts of horrifying things that are done around the world. And it's important that you call out when somebody's doing something evil.
Yeah, I guess the importance is to defend the right for cultural experiments to exist, but to also have the right to denounce them and defend your own culture, right?
Yeah.
So you can have both at once. You can respect people's choice to have their own experiments while equally denouncing those experiments and vehemently fighting against them.
Yes.
How is this best done? I mean, yeah, I guess on a national level, it is justified. You can shut cultures out that you don't like, that you think are toxic, because
toxic cultures won't come to your country if you don't engage in socialist practices.
Yeah.
That's the best way to keep these types of people away. It's just don't give money to people who are unproductive.
Yeah, no socialism. No socialism.
You cannot have, as my grandfather said, you cannot have generous social services in porous borders. And I believe that very strongly for the US. Do not have generous social services. That's how you keep out undesirable immigrants. You make it so that it's just a shit to be here if you're not productive.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this?
No. Love you to death, Simone. And yeah, I also think that people who haven't been around American culture may not realize like how close many Americans are to snapping.
Well, and I would hope many people in the UK. I hope that this drives people in families in UK to the brink, and whether this is through legitimate political means or illegitimate revolts, because I think maybe it's getting to the point where that
revolts aren't illegitimate when the government is immoral.
Yeah, but like something something has to change before more people get
A
hurt.
government built upon racism and viewing some ethnic groups as less deserving of human dignity than others deserves to be revolted. I think the UK government is already at they deserve to be overthrown. I think, honestly, if I was a monarch in Europe right now, I'd be like, this is my chance to reestablish a hereditary monarchy with power in our country. Because I think, for example, the citizens of the UK right now would be very for that.
Oh my gosh. So if Will and Kate were like, nope, screw this, we're taking it back.
Yeah,
We'll
we
step aside.
decided to stop the parliament. You guys aren't doing a very good job
Yeah,
of this whole
listen,
thing.
it was a good run. I mean, technically, I think the monarchy can do that.
The monarchy can.
Yeah. So
The question is just, does the public and the military support them at this point? I think just have the right conversations with the right military leaders and be like, look, this system is not working anymore.
well, Charles and Camilla won't be able to do it, but I think Will and Kate could if suddenly they got super based. I could see them being secretly.
Yeah. Oh no, Will and Kate, I could see. Yeah, so they were at St. Andrews, not far apart from me.
Yeah. They
2
can
years
work it
from
out.
me, actually. So like all of the older classmen when I was there were there when they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I could have married Will. I was this close.
Oh, passed over.
I'm not gay, but come on, I want to be king.
Yeah. Yeah. What a miss there. What a miss. But
All right,
well.
I love you to death, Simone.
I love you too, gorgeous.
My hair look bad?
I need to cut it.
Does it look bad? Is my question. It
looks. Yeah. I never want to say. You never tell a spouse that they look bad. You tell them. What does Mark Zuckerberg say, or like Priscilla Chan say to him? Something like, "Not your best work." It just sounds very high achieving, like high educated. Like it sounds like what Harvard grads would say. I really love the new Zuckerberg era. Whatever's going on here, it's good. He seems really secure and like he cares a lot less about what other people think, And there's just something about people when they get to that stage.
I am
feels really good.
One day, one of these people is going to find our show and be like, "Oh, I love you guys. Here's $1 billion to go do all your crazy ideas so you don't have to fund it yourself anymore." Or maybe our game will take off, which I am very, very excited about. I was working on it a lot today.
See, that would make me happy. Yeah.
So people who don't know, we are under the foundation, so under the nonprofit, been developing a LLM game. Well, it's a game, like a Rim World or an isometric type, like Fallout type, post-apocalyptic game, but done where every character is done with an LLM, and you play through it in a very, I almost call it like, it takes a lot from the Talos principle, and then it's really focused on like deeper philosophical questions, while also trying to deliver a very narrative and incredibly deep lore environment. And the faction I was working on today, you'd find them very fun, are the Mormons. I was working on a few factions, the Mormons, the Amish. So what happened to the Mormons is that the Central Mormon Church ended up capitulating more and more and more over time, attempting to be more normal, more like the urban monarchy.
No.
But a group of young Mormons began to popularize the use of an app that was trained on all of the older church fathers, all of the prophets, and the various biblical texts.
Okay, that's interesting.
The app they would consult it before doing things at first. Like, this is just the way it started. You would consult it before, okay, do I do X? Do I do Y? And as time went further, they began to see it as the equivalent of other holy scriptures. And they had a schism with the mainstream church. But it was very clear to people a few things. One is that the people who were following the app-based system were much more devout, followed things much better because they had put up iterations of the app across smart devices in their house. So it would basically watch them 24/7 to make sure that they were upholding everything and give them daily scores that were private to them. But
that's cool. It's as if God gave you immediate feedback, which honestly would be fantastic.
Well, yes, but it has more than that because it has a network of people who are in it. And also was able to do things like do marriage matching for them,
Mm.
do job placement for them within anyone in the network. And as it became clearer that this group was doing way better than the rest of the Mormons, and they began to gain respect from the rest of the Mormons, they reintegrated the two, and they ended up building out a giant, like, centralized GPU hub under the Temple Square, with eventually evolving like a priest-like cast of people to be like, oh, Mormons wouldn't evolve that. Look, Mormons had polygyny just, how long ago? Like, Mormons thought that like black people were like punished before. Like, Mormons adapt and evolve their beliefs faster than most other religions. It's both not an impossible thing, and it would be a very reasonable solution to fertility collapse without going with one of the more like extremist approaches.
Hmm.
And so they have built quite a utopia type area within their regions, with the obviously the caveat is that if you don't use the app directs everyone who is using it to ignore you and pretend you don't exist. So it's very hard to live or do business in Mormon territory unless you're part of this central network.
Interesting. Okay.
So come on, it's fun. I like that world.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
All right.
No,
Okay.
it's I could see that actually happening, which is what makes it really fun.
That's what I tried to do with everything in it. Like, I tried to make it everything is something you could see actually happening.
Yeah. This was a depressing discussion today, but what isn't depressing is NatalCon in Austin this March. You should come and hang out with us there and the many other cool pronatalists who will be present. Enter Collins at checkout for 10% off registration, which you should be saving money for your family. Do it. And we hope to see you there.
It's called onigiri. Can you say onigiri? Okay, go ahead and take one. Take one. Good. Take a bite. What do you think? Do you like it? You think you like onigiri? Can you say oishii desu? Oishii. Oishii desu ka? Oh, you take to it like a natural. Say oishii desu ka? Toasty, can you say itadakimasu? Okay, take your rice, take your triangle. It's not hot. Go ahead, try. No. You touch this one, you get this one, okay? Take this one. Take the one that you... Here. This one, my buddy.
What if some are okay?
No. You take a bite. It's a rice triangle.
No.
Okay, I'm going to save this one for you. We're going to save it for Toasty. You want to take another bite? Itadakimasu. Good job. Can you say onigiri? Onigiri. Yeah. Oh, no, onigiri. Giri. Onigiri. Ah, so yummy. It has salt on it.
We have salt.
Yeah, you want to try it? Pick it up and take a bite. Oh, yeah, that's how you eat. One noodle at a time. One grain at a time.
I'm getting all filled up.
It's very toasty friendly. Now, Titan, you hold it up and you just take a big bite like it's a big loaf.
It's so yummy.
Good job.